Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing the mid-year book freakout tag. I am going to be talking about great books, horrible books, books that just made me feel something, and this is definitely going to be a video. So let's get into it. The first prompt is the best book that I've read so far. I'm just gonna not abide by any of the rules that this tag gives. There are just too many books that I have to talk about, so I'm just gonna go through them really quickly, not gonna give much of a synopsis, if one at all. So the first book that is definitely my favorite out of the three is The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I've talked about this book for 2 videos now, and I don't think there's enough that I could say to really convey my feelings. I just think that it is gritty, it is sad, it is very funny at times. It really balances that fantasy and historical vibe very well. I don't know, this book just makes me feel all the things, and it is my life's goal now to just finish the series. But yes, I would totally recommend this if you go into this knowing what the trigger warnings are. I don't think I've seen anyone who hasn't talked about trigger warnings with this book. It is definitely full of them. It's super brutal and graphic. It is just so good. Please read it if you're ready for it. The next book that is the second most favorite is The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle by Stuart Turton. Again, a book that I've talked about multiple times now, but I cannot stop talking about it. It is just so fun and really chaotic at times. It is just such a mind bender, and it really makes you contemplate everything that's happening in it. It's just a very hectic murder mystery that I think gives you all the things that you would need. It's an adventure, so I would definitely recommend this. And finally, Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. The interview format is really what did it for me. That's what made me really love it. I don't think I would have liked it as much if it wasn't in that format. You want to sympathize with these characters, but you also want to really push them to the right path because they're just going so far off the deep end. You want to argue with them so many times because of their decisions, but again, they're just fun characters that feel human. Taylor Jenkins Reid made me Google this because I thought this was actually based on a real band. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's done this, but nonetheless, such a great book. 5 out of 5 stars. The next prompt is the best sequel. Okay, so I haven't read that many sequels this year. I've read 2 and I rated them very high. I don't think one really comes before the other because I can't remember what they were about. I know that at the time I really enjoyed them, but again, it doesn't really stick in my mind as much, so I'm just gonna list both of them, call it a day. First one, When Night Breaks by Janella Angeles. This is the sequel to Where Dreams Descend, and this one in particular I remember is very atmospheric. Janella Angeles has some of the most beautiful writing that I've ever read. This one is definitely more eerie compared to the first book. The first book was just very magical and it just felt like a huge spectacle, but this one is darker and very twisted in its approach, and that's why I rated this 5 stars. But it's probably strictly for the vibes that I rated it so high. It's definitely something you have to go into knowing that it is super atmospheric, very detailed in descriptions. It's just a magical book, and I would really recommend you go support Janella Angeles because she is a very awesome author. Then the next sequel that I read is Our Violent Ends by Chloe Gong. This is the sequel to These Violent Delights. This is a Romeo and Juliet retelling, and if you know what happens at the end of Romeo and Juliet, you will know what happens at the end of this book, so honestly, don't even need to explain the plot. At the time, I thought this book was better than the first book just because you can bypass all of the character building and world building that is necessary to build up the first novel and then just get straight into the action. While that is a good way of looking at it, I just think that the first book really did it for me. The fact that it was just new and original. And so this one I rated 4 stars, and I can't remember why this one didn't get as high of a rating. I think it was because it just took a very long time for me to read it, and that usually doesn't happen when it's a book that I'm super invested in. Putting all of that aside, I think that both of the sequels were very good. It's just this one I guess I rated lower. The next prompt is a new release you haven't read but want to. I have a couple of these. Again, I'm not following the rules, but the other reason, these are books that I have never talked about and I've also never really looked into that much. I didn't have any particular picks for this category. These 2 I found in my Goodreads TBR and realized that they had come out very recently, so I'm just gonna list them. First one is Portrait of a Thief by Grace Dealey. And the next one is Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. Portrait of a Thief I've just seen everywhere. I remember seeing someone who had probably gotten an ARC promoting it, and it sounded very interesting. It's got like a heist theme to it. And then Hotel Magnifique seems very similar to Caraval by Stephanie Garber, which is one of my like comfort series. They kind of have a little like remnants of books that I have read before and I really enjoyed, so that's why I want to read them in the very far future, because I have so many books that I need to get to. The next prompt is most anticipated release, and I can assure you there's only one that would ever fit this category. I keep saying category like it's a thing, but no, there's only one book that would really fit this prompt, and that is The Ballad of Never After by Stephanie Garber. This is the sequel to Once Upon a Broken Heart, which is kind of a spin-off of the Caraval series, and I'm just super excited because I loved Evangeline and Jax, their dynamic and their chemistry. Yes, I'm very excited for Ballad of Never After. It seems like it's going to be crazy. All right, biggest disappointment is the next prompt, and I have a couple for this. There were a lot that could fit this, but I think biggest disappointment really does go to The Honeymooners by Christina Lauren. It just wasn't what I hoped for, especially because it had such a promising first half. I loved Ethan and Olive's banter. I thought it was super realistic and funny, and it made me laugh several times. But as soon as they became an actual couple, then all of that just dissolved, and they had no chemistry from my personal opinion. And then the whole third act conflict, is that what that is? That happened, and it was unlike any that I had read in previous things. Like usually it's just the miscommunication trope, but this one just went kind of too far for me, and I thought that it had very little to do with the leads, but then it just involved them way too much, and then I was kind of questioning whether I liked Ethan at the end of it. It's very conflicting. I love the first half of The Honeymooners, that was great, but the second half just did not do it for me, so it is the biggest disappointment because I loved it in the beginning. And then the second one is more just a bad book than it is a disappointment, because I didn't have as high of expectations as I did for The Honeymooners, and that is The Spanish Love Deception by Elena Armas. First of all, this is not enemies to lovers. This is one person just doesn't like the other because of some misunderstanding. Then it's just taken out of proportion. It's a slow burn, but it's kind of the not enjoyable torturous slow burn, but like the really annoying one that you just want them to get it over with, because it is so obvious that they don't need to be this far apart because of that tension. And also the writing style and the constant repetitiveness of Aaron's blue eyes. Like, no, no, I don't need to hear about it. Black hair, blue eyes. Like, we get that he's probably very attractive, but we do not need to hear it every paragraph. All in all, just not my favorite romance that I've read. Not shaming anyone who likes this book. It's just not for me. The next prompt is biggest surprise, and this one I'm really happy to say is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. This is one I had to read for AP Lang this year. Normally I would never fully enjoy a book that I am assigned to read. Like, it just takes out all of the enjoyment for me. I think the fact that we had an assignment based around reading The Bell Jar, I think that was the reason why I liked it. Now, it wasn't a requirement, but I annotated it just to get all the quotes that I needed, because we had to write quotes in these books and draw like little drawings. But annotating it made it so much more enjoyable. Like, I could just write my comments and be like, oh my god, Esther, why would you do that? Or let's go, Esther. I just thought that Sylvia Plath's writing is just very descriptive and very like particularly descriptive. Comical, but it's actually very accurate, and you can definitely like envision things. So I loved that, and like the dry humor, dark humor, just everything about The Bell Jar was surprisingly good. Don't you love allergies? I do. Next prompt, number 7, is favorite new author. One of them is I feel like it doesn't even count because I've only read one book, but it is R.F. Kuang. She has just really blown me away with The Poppy War, and I'm really excited to get into the rest of the series, and also Babel, which is her newest book that's coming out later this year. And then the next author that I have is Taylor Jenkins Reid. I just love her writing style and just how unique her stories are. She really knows the ways that you need to format these types of stories, and it just ended up working so well for every single book that I've read so far. Number 8 is newest fictional crush. I think there's only one guy that really fits this, because he just, all my emotions go to him, and that is Brendan from It Happened One Summer. I'm not gonna go into detail of why, but he is just great. He is the best book boyfriend, and I just loved him and Piper together. So not necessarily like, he's not for me, He's for Piper. I just love how he treats her. It was so fun to get to see him interact with this super bubbly girl, which, by the way, I'm so excited for the adaptation of It Happened One Summer. I think it's being adapted by the same people who did The Hating Game, and I'm very excited. It's probably going to be a little bit different, so I'm a bit worried for that, but at the same time, it's just such a fun concept to adapt, and I think this is the grumpy guy and city girl. I think that this is the perfect book to adapt for that specific trope, so I'm super hyped for that. Number 9, newest favorite character. I really didn't know what to say for this one because I wasn't completely sold on any of the characters that I read. I think it was mostly just the plot lines and the descriptions that really made all these books for me. But if I had to choose, I would say Rin from The Poppy War, but also Bree from The Cheat Sheet. They're very different in personalities, but I just loved having them as the main characters. I think that they made the book better because they existed. Number 10, book that made you cry. To be quite honest with you, none of the books that I've read so far have made me cry. This is kind of a shock to me because I've read, I think, 41 if I'm remembering, and none of them have made me cry. Usually there are a couple at least. Honestly, I haven't read that many sad books. They're just all kind of, they have a darker tone to them, but it's not sad enough to make me like weep. But if I had to choose one, I would say We Were Dreamers by Simu Liu. Reading his story, his upbringing by his parents, that definitely almost made me cry because of how roughly he was treated. It was definitely not fair for him, and it affected how he went about his adolescence. There were just times where he would describe like certain moments that happened in his life where I did consider crying. I just felt so bad and I just really sympathized with him. If there was any book that I had to name, it would probably be this one. Number 11 is a book that made me happy. One that just takes the cake is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This is just such a pure, wholesome love story. This just beats all of the happy books ever. It just makes me so excited for Charlie and Nick, and it's just perfect in all the ways. So definitely this one. This is like number 1 most happy, wholesome book. We're getting to the last 2. Number 12, most beautiful book that I bought this year. Now, the book that I'm definitely putting at the top is The Ivory Key by Akshaya Raman. I read this for my AAPI video. It was definitely not one of my favorite fantasies that I've read, but this cover is what drew me into it. Just the colors, the vibrance, I just loved that part of it, and that's what really drew me to it because I'd never heard of this book beforehand. So Ivory Key is the winner on this one. And the last prompt, oof. Number 13, what books do you need to read by the end of this year? I have quite a few for this, and I've narrowed it down to 4. The first being Jade City by Fonda Lee. I really wanted to read this because it seems like it's right up my alley. Like, there's just so much nuance in the world building and all the characters. It seems very morally gray. It just has all the things that I would love to read in a book. So this is definitely at the top of my list. I also do need to finish Malibu Rising. This is definitely one I put off for way too long, but I think I've just been too chicken to really invest myself in it, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. Well, first of all, I'm very certain that I want to save this for fall, for October. This is a spooky paranormal book, so I want to save it for those vibes. Also, I've just heard a lot about how it's very graphic, but now that I've gotten into the Poppy War, I feel like I can handle the gore and the spooky stuff, so I think I should be okay, but I do want to save it for a certain time of the year. And the last ones that I have to say are One True Loves by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is pretty much just because there's going to be an adaptation of it, and I also love Taylor Jenkins Reid, so there's really no arguing in that. And finally, the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. I need to read the rest of that because obviously I'm probably just gonna like put down the book that I'm reading when they come in and just immediately devour those because it is top priority. But that is the end of the tag. Really hope you enjoyed this video. I'm gonna be going to Disney this Friday, so I'm really excited. I'm gonna try to vlog as much as I can. I'm very excited to film that for y'all, and I hope you have a great day, night, whenever you're watching this, and I will see you in the next video.